Building a strong foundation for gut health is crucial for infants. It plays a vital role in their growth, development, and overall well-being, helping them thrive. But what exactly is strong gut health? Strong gut health refers to the optimal functioning of the entire digestive system. Based on discussions within a scientific committee focused on gut health, 5 major criteria have been defined as the foundation for a more positive and objective definition of gut health. Effective digestion and absorption, absence of GI illness, healthy gut microbiota, effective immune system and overall well-being. Friesland Campina, with full control of all production stages from grass to glass, and leveraging 150 years of Dutch dairy science expertise, proudly introduces Friso Gold's new advanced formula with a milk lipid complex helping infants achieve strong gut health. Friso Gold's new advanced formula helps achieve effective digestion and absorption. Made with Novus milk, it has lower casein mineralization. It contains small molecules with soft structure known to form soft, easily broken down curds for easy digestion. Friso with Lock Nutri technology uses single processing and mild heat treatment to create a unique Friso formula with up to 55% lower protein glycation levels while preserving the potency of natural nutrients. Friso Gold's new advanced formula with milk lipid complex prevents fatty acid soap formation, which supports the effective absorption of fatty acids and calcium, helps reduce nighttime crying, fussiness, and lowers constipation. To sum up, we can say that Friso Gold continues to deliver trusted nutrition, supporting infants and building a strong foundation for gut health and overall well-being.
Hello everyone, I would like to welcome you all to this event. My name is Yannis Manios and my presentation will be focusing on shaping the early gut and the role of milk fat in nutrient absorption and development. Before proceeding, I would like to thank Friesland Campina for this kind invitation to participate in this event. The first important slide of my presentation is that breastfeeding is the best nutrition for healthy growth and development for babies. But of course, if breastfeeding is not feasible, we need to turn to infant formula. In this slide, you can see the recommended macronutrient intake from early infancy to adulthood. As you can see, protein and carbohydrate contribution to total energy intake is increasing while we're moving from infancy to young childhood and elderly. But exactly the opposite can be seen for a contribution of fat. Fat contributes about 50 to 55% of total energy needs in early infancy, and the contribution of fat is decreasing while we're moving to childhood and to adulthood. This observation highlights the very important role of fat from early life. Fat is not only important for young infants because of their energy contribution to the total energy needs of the infants, but they're also very important because they provide the sensory properties of milk to make it appealing and tasty for the infant. It provides essential fatty acids and cholesterol, and also provide very important fat-soluble vitamins, which all can be found in the fat of milk. At the same time, fat provides and ensures the optimum growth and development of gastrointestinal function, brain and cognitive development, and immune function. Despite the high dietary demands for lipids in early infancy, the overall absorptive and digestive capacity in newborns is still immature. Indicatively, I would like to remind you that the pancreatic lipase and bile salts activity is much lower compared to adults. These facts highlight the need for early digestive fats in infancy. Breast milk is certainly the benchmark, and the vast majority of the fat in breast milk comes in the form of triglycerides. The same applies also for fats and oils commonly used in infant formula. Also, the vast majority of fats in those fats and oils comes in the form of triglycerides. However, the structural organization of the triglycerides coming from those sources, either mammals and vegetable sources, they are significantly different compared to the triglyceride, to the organizational structure of the triglycerides in the breast milk. This is particularly true for the vegetable sources of fat. So although the concept in infant formula production is to try to mimic the breast milk, these oils and fats used in infant formula could potentially compromise the lipid digestion absorption from infant formula. So let's see, what do triglycerides look like? All triglycerides, regardless if they're coming from mammals or vegetable sources or fish, they all look the same from the distance, macroscopically. They are constituted by a glycerol backbone and 3 fatty acid chains attached to the glycerol backbone. And those fatty acid chains are classified as saturated, monosaturated, and polysaturated, depending on the level of saturation. And they're also classified as short-chain fatty acid, having less than 6 carbon atoms in their chains, as medium chains, having 6 to 12 carbon atoms in their chains, and long chains having more than 12 carbon atoms in their chain. One fatty acid which I will predominantly focus on my presentation is palmitic acid. Palmitic acid is one of the major fatty acids in breast milk, and it's a saturated long-chain fatty acid. It is saturated because all the atoms, all the bonds between the carbon atoms in its chains are single, and it's a long-chain fatty acid because it contains 16 carbons of carbon atoms. Now, during digestion and absorption of lipids, what really happens is that gastric lipases and pancreatic lipase selectively cleave at the SN1 and SN3 position of the triglyceride, liberating 2 free fatty acids, this one, and 1 monoglyceride at the center. Unsaturated fatty acids and short-chain saturated fatty acids are efficiently absorbed as free fatty acid. So this is indicated that the best position to ensure optimum absorption of those fatty acids is the SN1 and SN3 position. On the opposite, long-chain saturated fatty acids are optimally observed as monoglycerides, and this is indicating that the best position for those fatty acids, for the long-chain saturated fatty acid, is the SN2 position, where this fatty acid is attached on the glycerol backbone. One of those long-chain saturated fatty acids, as already mentioned to you, is palmitic acid. Going to the breast milk, I would like to indicate, as I mentioned earlier, that palmitic acid represents about 20 to 25% of total fatty acids. The vast majority of those palmitic acids are esterified at the SN2 position, here on the glycerol backbone, and that's why we call it SN2 palmitic acid or beta palmitate. So the majority, more than 70% of palmitic acid comes in the breast milk in the form of beta palmitate. For simplicity reasons, from now on, I will be calling the fatty acid esterified at the SN2 position as beta palmitate, because it is shorter and makes it easier for me and for you to follow the presentation. So when long-chain saturated fatty acids, such as palmitic acid, are present at the SN1 and SN3 position, as I just mentioned, this is not the optimum position to be esterified, because that will be affecting and minimizing, compromising their absorption. So when long-chain saturated fatty acids are released in the small intestine as free fatty acids, then what we see is that they form insoluble fatty acid soap complexes with calcium and magnesium. They're excreted in the feces, causing hard stools, gut discomfort, and constipation. So what we see here is that not only the absorption of those fatty acids, such as palmitic acid, is compromised, but also their presence at the SN1 and SN3 position can also create additional problems like causing hard stools, gut discomfort, and constipation. So we already mentioned that the breast milk fat, 70% of palmitic acid is esterified at the SN2 position. Regarding bovine milk fat, about 40% of palmitic acid is esterified in the SN2 position. But regarding vegetable fat blends, commonly used in infant formula production, only about 30% of palmitic acid is esterified in the SN2 position, while the majority of palmitic acids in those vegetable fat blends is esterified at the SN1 and SN3 position. And as I just mentioned, that could compromise absorption, but potentially create gut discomfort for the infant. But let's see now what's happening in real life. In this study was executed in Japan. This is an observational multi-center study on infants consuming formulas, available formulas in the Japanese market. In this table here, you can see the 10 formulas which were evaluated by the researchers in this study. And as you can see, from formula A to formula J, the concentration of beta palmitate is varying from 6.1% to 55.3%. So in my mind, the first 6 formulas more likely are using vegetable fat blends with palmitic acid at SN2 position lower than 30%. You can see it varies from 6 to 11.9. So more likely the vegetable source, the most likely the fat source used in those formulas are vegetable blends, while for the last 4 formulas, the fat source could be either bovine milk or more likely when we see so high concentrations of beta palmitate, more likely this triglycerides has been delivered by synthetic triglycerides. Synthetic beta palmitate means that the triglyceride has been enzymatically changed, which enzymatically changed in the lab, esterified the triglyceride, moving the palmitic acid from the SN1 and SN3 position to SN2 position. So via enzymatic process in the lab, we re-esterify the triglyceride in order to increase the beta palmitate content on the triglycerides. And these are also used in infant formula. The researchers for this study, despite the big difference on beta palmitate concentration between the 6 formulas and those 2 formulas here, they grouped them all together as low beta palmitate formulas and left only those 2 as high beta palmitate formula. Stools were collected from those infants. I forgot to mention to you that all those infants were at about 1 month of age. They were already consuming those formulas from the market. We don't know which formulas were consuming because this is not mentioned in the publication of the researchers. And stool samples were collected at this 1 month of age from all participating infants, also including a breastfed group in the study. So the findings of the study show that total fatty acid soaps and soap fatty acids here, total fatty acid and soap fatty acids excreted in feces were lower in the breastfed and the high beta palmitate group compared to the low beta palmitate formulas. Furthermore, no difference were observed between the breastfed and the high beta palmitate formulas, suggesting comparable absorption of fat and calcium in the breastfed and the high beta palmitate group. Still, it's very interesting to notice that for the low beta palmitate group, this here and this column here, the data, the measurements obtained regarding both total fatty acids and soft fatty acids, there's a big distribution on those measurements. And this indicates, at least to me, that more likely those measurements has been delivered by by those formulas with a very low concentration of beta palmitate, and those measurements at the bottom here were delivered by those two formulas with a relatively high beta palmitate concentration. And if those formulas were grouped differently, more likely we would see no difference between those two formulas and the high beta palmitate group and possibly the breast milk group as well. So these findings of this study, which is, as I mentioned to you, an observational study, this is not a randomized clinical trial. So the findings from this observational study raise two more questions. Is there an optimal threshold for beta palmitate levels that can deliver and produce stool soap profiles comparable to those observed with breast milk? So how can we define this optimum, and what is this optimal threshold, if there is one? And furthermore, is this benefit observed when using either sources of beta palmitate, bovine milk, vegetable oil, synthetic, fish milk, or other? In order to try to provide some answers to those questions, I will proceed and present to you a few randomized controlled trials. In this randomized controlled trial, which was executed in Germany, a standard formula with a concentration of beta palmitate lower than 10% was compared to a test formula with a concentration of beta palmitate at 25%, and the beta palmitate in this formula was delivered by a fat blend of cow's milk fat, fish, and plant oil, while also a breastfed group was included in the study. The age of enrollment for the infants participating in the study are below the 10th day of life, and the duration of the intervention lasted 12 weeks, with fecal samples collected at the end of the 12 weeks period. The results of the study showed for, this is the test formula, the standard formula, and the breastfed group. So the results of the study show that total fatty acid and fatty acid soaps excreted in the feces did not differ between the test formula and the standard formula. Furthermore, the concentrations of total fatty acid soaps and fatty acid soap were significantly higher compared to the breastfed group, suggesting a better absorption of fat from the breastfed group compared to both of those infant formula. So what we see here is that although in this formula, the test formula, the concentration of beta palmitates was increased significantly, much higher than the standard formula, still this formula, possibly due to the blend used, did not manage to deliver any further benefits compared to standard formula or breastfeeding related to total fatty acid soaps and fatty acid soaps excreted in the feces. So the question now raises, what about if we replace vegetable sources only with bovine milk in order to further increase the contribution of beta palmitate in the formulas? And this study, this hypothesis, was tested here in Athens, in Greece. The hypothesis was that if we manage to increase further the beta palmitic acid, beta palmitate in the formula, using a combination of vegetable fat blends, but also a large part of bovine milk fat in the formula, we could possibly improve fatty acid and calcium absorption, lower soap formation and calcium excretion in the feces, and that can potentially improve stool consistency. This study was executed with the support and contribution of Friesland Campina, and I would like to thank once again Friesland Campina for their kind and supportive collaboration for the study. Friesland Campina developed and delivered to us 3 different formulas. The first formula contained 50% milk fat, so 50% of the vegetable fat blend in the standard formula was replaced with 50% milk fat, delivering 39% beta palmitate in the formula. The second formula contained 20% milk fat, so 20% of the vegetable fat blend was substituted with 20% milk fat, delivering about 20% beta palmitic acid, beta palmitate in the formula. And the third formula was a standard formula with vegetable fat blend, delivering 10.1% of beta palmitate. In order to test this hypothesis, we executed two double-blind, randomized controlled crossover studies. The age of enrollment of the infants for those two studies were between the 9th and the 14th week of age, and infants were divided in crossover study 1 and crossover study 2. The first group of the crossover study 1 was fed with 50% milk fat formula for 2 weeks, and then those infants were substituted to the standard formula for 2 more weeks. At the same time, another group within this study 1 were fed initially with the standard formula, and then they were substituted to the 50% milk fat formula. The same procedure was followed for the crossover study 2, and in this crossover approach, what we actually, a benefit of this study is that infants are, regardless whether they are in the standard formula or in the test formula, they also become in control of themselves, as all infants in each of those studies consume both of the formulas, both the milk fat and the standard formula, for a 2 weeks period. At the end of the 2 weeks period for both studies, stool samples collected to be analyzed, and stool consistency was evaluated based on the Amsterdam Infant Stool Scale. That was repeated at the end of the first 2 week period, and that was repeated again at the end of the second 2 weeks period. The results of the study show the following. On these graphs here, you can see palmitic acid soaps in stools, and on the right, you can see total fatty acid soaps in stools. So the results of the study show that both infant formula with 50% and 20% milk fat resulted in lower palmitic acid soaps and total fatty acid soaps excretion in stool samples compared with the standard formula. And this is suggesting a higher absorption of fatty acid and palmitic acids for those two formulas. Furthermore, it's interesting to notice that the results were more pronounced for the 50% milk fat formula compared to the 20% milk fat formula, both for the palmitic acid soap as well for the total fatty acid soaps. Furthermore, regarding calcium excretion in stools, we can see the same finding that both milk fat formula lower calcium excretion in stools compared to the standard formula. And again, this finding, as you can see, these significant differences, this is suggesting a potentially higher absorption of calcium for those two formulas, both the 50% and the 20% milk fat formula when compared to standard formula. Regarding stool consistency, we found that the 50% milk fat formula had a significantly lower and therefore better score compared to the standard formula. The score obtained from those infants consuming the 50% milk fat formula regarding the stool consistency is somewhere between soft and watery, which is much closer to the stool consistency observed in breastfed infants, and thus we consider this a very important benefit delivered by the 50% milk fat formula. However, this benefit was not observed for the 20% milk fat formula when compared to standard formula. To summarize the findings of the study, what we saw from this study is that soap formation and calcium excretion were significantly lower when 20 and 40% beta palmitate derived from bovine milk was given to those infants. That these findings indicate a potentially higher fatty acid absorption and a higher calcium absorption for both milk fat formulas, while improved stool consistency was only observed for the 40% milk fat formula. Now, the next question raised is, if we have a potentially higher calcium absorption, could this higher calcium absorption lead to higher bone density for those infants? This hypothesis was examined in this study, which was executed in France. And for the needs of this study, the one standard formula with 16% beta palmitate and one test formula with 43% synthetic beta palmitate was tested. And one more formula, test formula 2 with 51% beta palmitate, again from synthetic triglycerides. The age of enrollment for the infants of this study was between the first and the 7th day of life, and the duration for the study was 4 months. What we can see here from this study is that in the white bar, which is the standard formula, compared to the two other test formula 1 and test formula 2, the other two bars here, what we see is that both of test formulas perform significantly better when it comes to consistency scores from the beginning of the study up to the 2nd month of age. This was evaluated with a modified Bristol stool form scale for children, and this finding indicates softer stools during the first 2 months of life for the two test formulas when they were compared to the standard formula. However, it's interesting to notice that this difference is lost at the 3rd and 4th month of age. So in the 3rd and 4th month of age, no differences on stool consistency was observed between those three formulas. Now, let's move to the interesting part of this research study regarding body composition measurements as they were obtained by DEXA at the 4th month of age. You can see that standard formula, test formula 1, and test formula 2 do not differentiate when it comes to lean mass and fat mass measurements. But when it comes to bone mineral content, we can see significantly higher results in test formula 1 and test formula 2, indicating a significantly higher bone mass measurements for test formula for the infants consuming the test formula 1 and test formula 2 compared to the standard formula. So the next question again raises, what about gut microbiome? Could potentially the low calcium fatty soaps excreted in the feces beneficially affect the gut microbiome, make it more similar to breastfed infants, promoting and the increased concentration of gut bifidobacteria? So this hypothesis was examined in this study, which was executed in Japan. And for the needs of this study, a standard formula with a 10.3% concentration of beta palmitate was compared to a test formula with structural triglycerides, delivering 46.3% of beta palmitate in this formula and a breastfed group. And the age of enrollment for those infants was between the 2nd week of age, 7 and 14 days of life, and the duration of the intervention was, sorry, this is a mistake, it was not 24 months, it was 24 weeks. So the infants from all those three groups were followed for 24 weeks, and the results of the study indicate that this is the white bar is the standard formula, the gray is the test formula, and the dark black bar is the breastfed group. So the findings of this study indicate that bifidobacteria abundance at the week 16 and week 24 was higher for the breastfed group and test formula compared to the standard formula, the white bars. And furthermore, no difference were observed in the bifidobacteria abundance between the test formula and the breastfed formula. And this does indicate that gut bifidobacteria could significantly increase with the use of a formula high in beta palmitate and deliver results similar to breastfed infants. Last but not least, and in order to complete also my presentation, all those previous findings observed regarding soap formation, calcium excretion, and potential benefits of fatty acid absorption, calcium absorption, and stool consistency, and possibly also gut microbiome, could those findings further lead to improve GI or minimize GI discomfort for the infants, minimize time of crying and fuzziness for the infants, and furthermore improve and increase time of sleep for the infants consuming a high beta palmitate formula? These questions were trying to be answered by this observational study. This is a cross-sectional observational study, which was executed in China. And infants in this study were already consuming one of those 4 formulas available in the Chinese market. The infants were recruited before the 4th month of age, and the parents were asked to complete a couple of diaries, questionnaires, and provide answers to some questions related to the well-being of the infants for over a 7 days period. So parents were asked not to change anything in the children's diet or daily habits. The infants were continuing to consume one of those formulas as already consuming the previous months, and just over a 7 days period, some data was collected by the parents. So the 4 formulas examined from those cohorts is formula number 1, a formula containing milk fat and vegetable fat blend delivering a beta palmitate concentration of 20%. Formula 2 and formula 4 were 2 formulas where synthetic vegetable blends were used to deliver 43.5% and 40% of beta palmitate in those formulas. And infant formula 3, where it was a standard formula with a vegetable fat blend, palm oil free vegetable fat blend delivering 10.2% beta palmitate. Now, regarding stool consistency, as you can see, the vast majority of the reported cases are in soft and foam stools, and that was, of course, expected because we are talking about healthy infants. Still, it's interesting to notice that for the infant formula 1 with a 20% milk fat, a significantly better, higher report of soft stools was reported. So a significant higher number of infants' defecations were characterized as soft and foam compared to the 3 other formulas. And this significant difference was up to 23% more cases were reported by the parents as soft stools compared to the 3 other formulas. Regarding hard stools, again, a similar finding, a significantly lower number of cases reported, and let me repeat it. A significant lower number of defecations were characterized as hard stools in the case of infant formula 1, with a 20% milk fat formula compared to the 3 other formulas. Regarding GI discomfort, the formula number 1, again with a 20% milk fat formula, performed significantly better regarding GI symptoms like diarrhea, flatulence, and constipation when it was compared to the 3 other formulas. And as you can see, regarding diarrhea, there was a significantly 26% less cases reported of diarrhea for this infant formula. In the case of flatulence, a significantly number of going up to 23% of less cases of flatulence was reported for this formula compared to the 3 other formulas. And in the case of constipation, a significant lower number of cases of constipation were reported, up to 25% compared to the 3 other formulas for the infants consuming this formula. And finally, regarding nighttime crying, actually the time of crying and fuzziness was measured throughout the whole day, but there was no difference found during the crying and fuzziness during the day, but a significant lower duration of crying and fuzziness at night was reported for the infant formulas for the infants consuming the infant formula 1 with a 20% milk fat blend compared to the 3 other formulas. Regarding duration of sleep, there was not a significant difference observed among those 4 formulas, but from many studies we have seen that when the time of crying and fuzziness overnight is significantly decreased, there's a trend for higher and longer duration of sleep and quality of sleep for the infant and the whole family as well. Now, the take-home message in order to conclude my presentation is that standard infant formula using in majority of those standard infant formula, vegetable fat blend is used, leading to a low levels of beta palmitate compared to breast milk. So what we saw in these studies presented to you today is that when we substitute vegetable fat sources in those infant formulas with alternative high beta palmitate sources, we could deliver the following benefits. First benefit, we could lower fatty acid soap formation and calcium excretion in feces, and that was certainly the case when the beta palmitate from synthetic triglycerides at the concentrations higher than 40% was given to the infants. Interestingly, when bovine milk fat was used, this benefit was observed even for lower concentration of beta palmitate. 20% beta palmitate and 40% beta palmitate delivered by bovine milk fat managed to also show lower fatty acid soap formation and calcium excretion in feces. And these findings indicate for all those formulas that there's a potentially higher absorption of fatty acids and calcium in the small intestine. Furthermore, these findings lead to improved stool consistency. Still, it's interesting to notice that the findings regarding stool consistency varies by study design, fat blend, levels of beta palmitate, and infant age. In bovine milk, it was found that favorable effects when compared to standard formula and high beta palmitate from synthetic triglycerides, while for synthetic triglycerides, some inconsistent results were found, especially for ultimate infants. So bovine milk formulas perform better when they're compared to standard formula and high beta palmitate formulas delivered by synthetic triglycerides. The third benefit from formulas with high concentration of beta palmitate is that they can potentially lower GI discomfort and decrease nighttime crying and fuzziness. That was found in the study presented to you from China, where favorable findings were observed for the 20% beta palmitate bovine milk formula when it was compared to standard formula and high beta palmitate formulas from synthetic triglycerides. And finally, all the above findings could lead, especially when it comes to calcium absorption in the GI tract, could lead to increased bone mineral density and gut microbiota. And that was also shown in this presentation. Although we have some limited data, these data are very encouraging, supporting the benefits of high beta palmitate infant formula, delivering high bone mineral density, but also gut microbiota, more likely to the better calcium absorption in the small intestine and the lower concentration of calcium fatty acid soaps in the large intestine, creating an environment in the large intestine more favorable, closer to the environment in the gut created by breastfeeding. And my last presentation, my last slides, I would like to thank you for your attention.